Now, once upon a time, if you can picture in Africa, there was a wise and kind old man, and he lived in one of those sort of mud huts with the thatched roof, and surrounded by this hut with these bushes, and they attracted the butterflies to the bush. And sort of seasons came, the butterflies came in, they laid their eggs, the caterpillars appeared, the cocoons formed, and the butterflies hatched again and flew off. And one day he noticed there was one cocoon sitting in the bush. All the butterflies had gone. And this cocoon, he was very worried that this butterfly had not hatched. And he said, "It needs my help." So he sort of broke it off the tree, took it into his hut, and carefully looked over it for a couple of weeks. And after 2 weeks, it started to sort of hatch out of the cocoon. And he sort of started to separate, and it was really struggling. And this man said, "This butterfly needs help." So he sort of carefully opened this cocoon up, and out pops the butterfly. He sits it on his finger, as in that picture, and he sort of blew on its wings and nurtured it, and the butterfly sort of flapped its wings a bit, and then it fell down dead. Now, he was a wise man and a kind man, and he wondered what he had done. And the reality is the butterfly needed to struggle. The butterfly needed to, struggling to get out of the cocoon was the way to get blood into its wings. It needed to in its own time, turn into a butterfly. This man had killed it with kindness. And really, it's this concept. This concept has a term or word that the Zulus use. It's called Vemvan, the name of our organisation. And this concept of Vemvan, it does literally mean butterfly in the Zulu language, but it refers specifically to this moral story of helping others. And it's this approach that underpins really what we are about as an organisation. Now, as Frank said yesterday in his talk, as an organisation, we really seek to be an instrument or a tool that people can use. We're not the be-all, end-all of a person's life. Like we seek to provide support where it is most needed and when it is most needed. We know from experience that you can disable a person's life and substitute it with a constructed life that is drowning in a sort of a dark, deep sea of human services. In effect, as Patrick described yesterday, you can turn people with possibilities into people with disabilities. So Vemvan was established in 1988 by a small group of families who shared a common vision of services. Now, these people knew each other through Active Foundation, which is a large organisation in Perth, running sheltered workshops, the day custodial facilities. And that organisation was also founded by parents previously as well, but it had turned into really an empire of despair. And the one thing these families had in common were they had other sons and daughters and wondered why their son and daughter with a disability couldn't have a life that was a bit similar to what their non-disabled sons and daughters were having. So they really sought services that were individualised. Now, at first, these parents were quite difficult parents, and they annoyed a lot of bureaucrats, and some money was thrown to keep us quiet. So we formed this organisation of Vemvan. Now, with these individualised services, really these are provided one-to-one, one person at a time, focused on the one person who has the disability or the possibility. Now, we also have services that We favour friendships and freely given devotions. For us, it's not about money, it's about the quality of the relationships and the extent to which they can grow and mature and yield opportunities for a person with a disability. So we engage what we call link people, and link people can be paid or unpaid, but they pretty much do very similar things to each other. We have a preference for unpaid people, but where the need is specific and it needs to be at a certain time, we will engage paid people. Approximately 50% of our services are engaged by people who are not paid. So they wanted services that yielded inclusive opportunities. These were opportunities that catered for all people and that did not segregate people from the rest of the community. Now, creating communities is kind of like making a vegetable soup. You sort of add the stock, which is kind of like the average Jack and Jill and Joe, and you add a few sort of vegetables like the people at Family Advocacy thrown in. If you want exotic vegetables, you get exotic people from overseas. But by itself, it's just a broth. It's just a tasteless broth. You need to add salt to the soup. Without the salt, the soup has no taste. Without people with disabilities, the community is bland and has no taste or character. And that's really where the idea of including people with disabilities came from our point of view. We provide community-based services. That means there's no centre where you'll find Van. I do have an office. It's 2.5 metres by 3 metres. I measured it before I came. It costs $1,400 a year to rent the space. That includes all electricity, broadband, and I was the treasurer of the organisation who owns the building for 4 years, and that's what happens when you engage a psychologist to be your treasurer rather than an accountant. Now, we provide services on a small scale. Okay, which means we've determined to keep a small size of organisation. And I can say since 1988, we've grown a lot with our client members, but the number of people we provide services to has remained the same, about 30 people. And really, it's important to us that everyone in the organisation, from the person actually in charge of the organisation running the services, knows every single client personally. Many of them are my friends, some of them are not my friends, but I know pretty much all about their family situations. So really, we did not want to become, as I'll say again, an empire of despair. And we also provide services in a local area. We only operate in the northern suburbs of Perth because we know those communities well. 2 decades in those communities. We pretty much know what the resources are there, what the good points are, what the bad points are. We will go outside of those areas to help people create a home if there's not enough opportunity for them in the areas that we are servicing. But for us, it's important to be linked with our local communities. You won't see any signs of Venvan up. There's no signage anywhere. We go into the office, and then after we've finished in the office, we actually go to work. Now, we initially started to provide short breaks for people with disabilities, and these were known as respite. We are still funded as a respite provider, and we conceived of breaks as being a situation where a person with disabilities enjoyed some sort of opportunity that they would benefit from in some sort of way. The fact that parents got some respite or a break from that opportunity was fantastic and a great outcome, but it was a secondary outcome as far as we were concerned. Our primary focus was on the needs of the person with a disability. So after some time, these breaks started to get a bit longer. They started with sort of a few hours here and there, and they went into day trips, into weekends away. People planned holidays together. I actually was a volunteer myself. I took a man trekking to Nepal, which was quite significant for him because he had weakness on one side of his body. He had a size 11 foot on this side and a size 8 foot on that side, so it was great to get boots. But what his family doesn't know is we were crossing a river. I can tell because there's no one from Western Australia who can tell on me here. We were crossing a river and he slipped on a suspension bridge and he went off sideways and his big foot saved his life. It was the last thing hanging. He was hanging completely off the side. If he had normal size feet, he'd be in the river, still today. So many of these holidays, for some people these were the first time they'd been away from their families and really done the things that they wanted to do. And eventually some of these adults came back to us and said, look, I want this holiday to be permanent. I don't want to go back and live with mum and dad. I want my own home. It was very clear. We were initially unsure how to go about providing for a person's home. The one thing we knew was we knew our people very well, and we were probably best placed to try and meet that need. But we didn't purport to be experts or highly qualified people. We just had some good intentions and we thought we'd give it a go. And so essentially we looked at, it became clear to us what was good to do and what was not good to do. And things to avoid we discovered by looking at the most innovative housing we could find in Western Australia. Firstly, groups never entered our head, but clustered housing. I looked at a place that housed 8 people with disabilities, and I discovered they were together in separate units, pulling their resources together. And what I found was those who could not advocate for themselves were getting very poor services, and those who had a voice were getting the lion's share of the shared services, and it was unfair. We also looked at a lot of places that seemed to be in group homes that were in very marginalised areas next to rehab centres, cat shelters. None of those people appeared to need rehab or wanted a cat, but they were close to them. So and the other thing was they essentially were very ugly houses, that were available, quite cheap places, run down, certainly not a place I would live in. The third thing is disinfectant. Now, it's interesting, I got permission from an agency, not from the people who live in the house, but the agency gave me permission to have a look at the house. And the first thing I noticed when I opened the door was hospital-grade disinfectant smell hit my nose. And there was also lino all over the floor throughout the entire house, and the bedrooms and everything, curved at the walls so they could mop this disinfectant through the entire house. And really what it told me was that the people who lived there had no choice. No one wants to live with that in their own home. And so from then on I thought, I won't go near disinfectant again. Also applying traditional systems in non-traditional settings, we found that was quite prevalent in Perth at the time. We're talking 20 years ago now, and it's still the case today too. I visited a house. I had a choice of visiting a house. One was called the Kangaroo House, the Emu House, and there was a Possum House. I went to the Possum House. There was not one happy little possum in that house, I can tell you. The first thing I noticed was a desk and a filing cabinet at the front entrance where they kept the money for the people who lived there under lock and key. There were rosters and schedules all over the wall. This was clearly a workplace, not a home. We also wanted to avoid reliance on paid support because we discovered that places that had 24-hour rostered 7-day-a-week schedules going on with all paid workers, we found that the people living in the homes were, despite being surrounded by people, were incredibly lonely because there was no relationship, it was just personal care. Once I had a man from one of these organisations come to us for work, and I asked him why he wanted to work with people with disabilities, and he was a person with a lot of experience, and he told me because he's good at toileting and showering people. He didn't work with us. The other thing we wanted to avoid was planning that was funding dependent. Now, over the years, we've assisted 12 individuals to move into their own homes, and none of them had funding, not one, to begin with. We just went ahead and did it. The funding caught up. The Commission, Disability Services Commission, wanted to support something that was good, and they could see this was good. We did a creative way of operating our funds. We managed to convince the Disability Services Commission that it would cost us $10,000 to provide respite for a client, or we could take $10,000 and provide them with a living opportunity, the same amount of money. And so we were allowed to quarantine funds from our core funds for the use of that particular person. But it still left them quite vulnerable because they were really reliant on our funding as an organisation. So the sorts of things that we've actually tried to do, because it's pretty easy to whinge and complain and see all the bad stuff, but there's a lot of good things you can actually do. And we started off by providing a lot of new opportunities for people. And so we try a range of new activities, things they've never tried before, opportunities where people can actually meet other people. Because when you have a broader range of experience, you start to form ideas about how you want to work, rest and play. And really it's a way to sort of sort out the sort of adult life that you want to lead. If you have limited experiences in life, you will make visions and judgments from that limited experience. We tried to build up expectations, which for our families was not a hard thing to do because they had high expectations, but occasionally they needed a nudge. I had a father, I asked him what his ideas were for his son in the future, and he'd said to me, we'll build a granny flat out the back and he can go and live there. And I said, have you ever thought about the possibility of him moving into his own place and maybe sharing it with a friend or two? He said, oh, no, not really. And just planting that seed, just that short little seed is now turned into a passion for this family. That's what they want for their son, and that's what they're planning towards now. We also support the vision and informed choices. Really, that comes with knowing people, listening to what they are saying. People have said to me the things that have been quoted, I want to be free to live my own life. It's my young life. Someone said, I want to live in a mansion by the beach with Britney Spears. That man is living by the beach today with two very attractive blonde women, much more attractive than Britney Spears. One man couldn't say anything, but I got a call on a Sunday afternoon. The parents were concerned because he was out in their semi-rural property and he was vandalising the trees with an axe. And I sort of went round there and he sort of calmed down when he saw me. He didn't want to be around his family. And I discovered that he'd just found out his youngest sister got her driver's licence. And this was a man who wanted a home and a life. We aim to support and extend social networks, so that can be reimbursing people for some of their expenses, if that's a way to encourage a friend or a neighbour to be involved with the person. When I talk about social networks, I'm not talking about Facebook. We're talking about the sorts of friends who might pick you up at 3 o'clock in the morning at the airport, not ones who are going to text you left, right and centre, but real friends. And that's what most of our work is about, developing those friends. We also have faith that people are basically good. When links are not that strong or the person doesn't have a lot of friends outside of their family, you have to have faith that a stranger there's no stranger danger, essentially. With co-residents, for example, to co-reside with a person with a disability, at the very beginning, we didn't have people who wanted to live with people with disabilities. So we just advertised in the newspaper under general accommodation, girl or guy to share a place. Didn't say it was with a person with a disability, just a location. And we found 80% of people didn't care whether it was with a person with a disability or not. We cast a wide net, caught a lot of fish, had a lot of choice for our clients to choose who they wanted to live with. We also take risks in what we do. I think there's quite a beautiful quote that I came across. William Arthur Ward, very quotable author, sort of sums up our approach to risk. He says, "To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. To reach for another is to risk involvement. To expose your feelings is to risk exposing your true self. To place your ideas, your dreams before a crowd is to risk their loss. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To live is to risk dying. To believe is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. But risks must be taken, because the greatest hazard in life is to risk nothing. The person who risks nothing, does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. They may avoid suffering and sorrow, but they cannot learn, feel, change, grow, love, and live. Chained by their attitudes, they are slaves. They have forfeited their freedom. Only a person who risks is free." So that really sums up our approach to risk-taking. Now, really allow mistakes to be made. When people moved into their home, a lot of mistakes were made by everybody. For example, recently, one of my clients, he had a party at his house, and I was actually invited to this party. I went along. I left at 11 o'clock. It was quite a loud party, but good-hearted. And at 20 past 11, the police turned up, shut the party down, and took names of people living there. It transpired that the next day, I found out that my client had actually called the police on his own party. I asked him why, and he said, "Because I'm helping my neighbours." He said, "If I didn't call the police, they would have." The community makes mistakes all the time. I worked with the man for a long time. He got the confidence to finally use the train by himself. And the first time he went to use it by himself, he was escorted off the train by security guards who thought he was drunk or on drugs. He had some slurred speech and slow movement, and that was a mistake from the community, and that was an opportunity for them to learn something. I've made a lot of mistakes over the years, and I make mistakes every single day, and I won't tell you what they are, but because I'd like you to think I've got a sort of halo around me. That's not a blue light, that's my halo. But it's through mistakes that people learn. Okay, so don't be frightened by them when they occur. We also aim to foster ownership of people's homes. So these are not Van homes. This is not our community living program. Decisions, we encourage them to come from the people in the arrangement itself. That's the person with the disability, the people they live with, their families. We encourage growth, and we respond positively to new ideas. So, for example, if we think people need, a household needs to sort of be a bit more social, we might get them a barbecue or something. People have become members of the West Coast Eagles and gone off and watched football. We'll pay for their memberships, or gone on joint holidays, and we might pay for one of the airfares for them to enjoy a holiday together, the person with the disability and the people they're living with. Now, years of government monitoring has taught us nothing about how to improve these living arrangements. The one suggestion that was given over all the years was that we should install fire extinguisher in every house, and that's been absolutely rejected by every single client. So in terms of safeguards, we thought we'd better come up with our own monitoring approaches. And the first one is to install a door lock. And we have keys for all of the people that we support in their own homes. And in 20 years, the number of times I've used those keys to enter their house, 0. Never. We keep the keys if they lock themselves out. They can give us a call and we'll come and help them out. We need permission from them to enter their house. They let us in. Okay? So this is really about home ownership. It's important that people have bills in their names, that they determine how the home runs, that they're participating in their home. It's cleaning, gardening, preparing meals, shopping, and contact with neighbours. And they determine who they're going to live with, that it's not us imposing people onto them. We also look to follow the leader. There has to be a strong leader in these living arrangements because they're vulnerable. At least one person must have some strong, clear ideas. It can be the person with the disability, it can be the family member, it can be a service provider, but there has to be some sort of leadership there. And the leaders have to be persistent and determined, as I'm sure most people in the family advocacy understand that. We proceed one by one, so the living arrangement is developed around the person, and each living arrangement is unique. People have phoned me and said, I'm really interested in your co-residency program. We don't have a co-residency program. It varies from individual to individual, how we support them, how they live, where they live. There's no real model as such, just a number of ideas and concepts. Grouping people with disabilities is something we don't do, but it's their choice. We had a woman who met a man, they got married, they both have intellectual disabilities. It's not a group home, it's a family. Now we believe everybody should have a friend with a disability and a friend without a disability. Plan like there's no tomorrow. We find planning a useful thing to do, but do we sit down and do annual service plans? No. Our planning is ongoing and informal because plans can change from day to day, week to week. It can be initiated by us if we feel that the future of the person's home is at risk, such as change in their health, their family is ageing, or changes in the way that we can use funds. We may look to plan around that. The question is, who's the boss? Now, is the person restricted by the agency that's overseeing things, by our regulations and the way we do things? If so, it shouldn't be a barrier. There's no rosters, no schedules. I call it organised spontaneity. It's something that is how we go about providing our service. The supports should be flexible and strong, and a variety of supports, paid if appropriate, but a lot of unpaid involvement as well. Let technology be used if it's available and can assist the situation and the person to communicate or around their household. We will use it and seek it. Now, you can choose your friends but not your family. This is really about social inclusion, and really we look to see, we judge the success of our living arrangements if the person has close and long-lasting relationships that extend well beyond and outside of their own families, that they're part of a range of in a range of communities. You know, it could be in the neighbourhood, a work community, recreation, educational, and that this participation actually reflects their likes and interests. We encourage people to keep growing and aim for the horizon, because the horizon is nothing you ever reach. You keep journeying towards it. Once a coordinator told me a few years ago that John, a client, had plateaued. And I said, no, he's not plateaued. We have plateaued. We're letting him down. For us, growth is a lifelong process. And I just want to say, remember the butterfly. You know, at the end of the day, organisations like ourselves, we don't kid ourselves. We are service providers. We're here to be used, if needed, as a tool to enhance the life of people. Struggle is necessary. Risk is essential. Without struggle and risk, there is no life. Thank you.